Roger Whiteley, who I introduced earlier. Roger's actually a regular to our meetup. So over the months that I've been organising this meetup, we built a really good rapport, and so he keeps me up to date with some of the projects that he's involved with, and I've been quite sort of fascinated from as a non-technical individual to hear about some of the stuff that he gets involved with on a day-to-day basis, and actually some of the things that Fujitsu as an organisation are doing in the space. Mostly, I would say, in the IoT industrial stroke enterprise rather than consumer space. The connected cow, for example, which Roger will tell you about in a moment, and also helping logistics companies with smart vans to enable their engineers to exchange data more effectively. So what I did want to mention is our sponsor. So Dr. Tim Willis, do you want to have a quick say about your organisation? But Tim essentially is paying for the snacks and the drinks for the meetups. So over to you very quickly. A little plug for our sponsor.
So we're an Edinburgh startup. We do text input font. Am I in shot? So we're an Edinburgh startup. We do word prediction.
Forward. A little bit more. A little bit more. A little bit more. Up. You're right. A bit more. Okay, go.
So I put up with this every day because I work with it.
I've actually cut your head off on the live stream. That's fine. Carry on.
So, yeah. So if you know anybody with a wearable, with an Android Wear smartwatch, please get them to download our app. It's called Tusi, T-U-S-I. Please share it with other people and give us your feedback, because it's a very early beta version at the moment, but it's for entering text for messaging, mainly for messaging, and
okay,
in
that'll do.
Yeah, Tusi, please download
You've
it.
got your airtime now. Roger.
There's also Product Forge.
So X marks the spot. Does it just about here?
That
We should have
will
some
do
tape on the.
nicely.
We should
You're
have
right
some
in
tape
shot
on the
for
floor.
For the YouTube, Alan, you're good.
Right. Okay. Well, thanks very much, Simon. Now, it was my idea, the last, I think, IoT meeting, but one that we covered security, because it's actually something pretty close to my heart. Now, I've been doing. He put my biog up on. He asked for my biog earlier, and I said, hacker, geek, but I've been doing this stuff for 30 years, and one of the first things I did was supervisory control and data acquisition systems. That's SCADA for short. Now, nobody in his right mind would connect a SCADA system that controls a nuclear reactor up to the internet, but they do in the States, without a firewall. So, thank you very much, Simon. And I would absolutely concur with Bob, and he's teed up some of the things I'm going to talk about perfectly. So, attack vectors, tick. A few other things as well. I work for Fujitsu. I've been there for 10 years. I'm a distinguished engineer. That just means that I've got quite a lot of grey hair. So it's platinum. So moving swiftly on, I'm not here to plug anything, but most of you'll think, oh, what do Fujitsu do? So I'm going to cover that very briefly. This year we're actually celebrating our 80th anniversary, and we do lots of things, and we don't make cameras. So we don't make cameras. This year we've been named as Responsible Business of the Year for business in the community. We have a corporate relationship with Action for Children. That's all over the UK, and there's a separate one in Northern Ireland. And we're Stonewall top 100 employers for this year. Now, what I have got, and see if I can work this, is this is the only bit of the shameless plug, and I'm hoping that I can see this. Yes, keep going. Right, but I did clear this with.
Foundation in 1935. Fujitsu has pursued innovation, striving for a better tomorrow. In the 1950s, we saw the growing possibilities of computers and began to create our own computer technology. And as our reputation for high quality continued to spread throughout the 1970s and 80s, our telecommunications and computer business grew rapidly. And when we introduced the world's fastest supercomputer in 2011, we helped advance human understanding across the world. From day one, our success as a company at every step along the way has come from the strength of our relationships. And as the world becomes ever more digital, we understand that no matter what, people will always come first. We are Fujitsu. Together, We are shaping tomorrow with you.
Thank you for your indulgence. So, let's see if I can find the rest of it. Here we go. So that was, sorry?
Very interesting, that video that was just queuing up there.
I think it might, it's auto-playing the other one, isn't it?
All right, so we'll kill that. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the things that fascinate me. Oh, for goodness sake. Yeah, I know. And what I could do with doing is that. Perfect. So one of the things that we've got quite a background in security. We have a security operations centre in the UK. And if you Google Drydex, you will find that it was a really serious banking hack. And it was the guys in our security operations centre that actually gave the government the right information in order to be able to nail it. So it is relevant, and so security is really important. And in a past life, I was responsible for the internet security of a large aerospace manufacturer who shall remain nameless, and it consisted of an awful lot more than a firewall. That's all I'm going to say on that. So this is I've borrowed some slides from a colleague. So this is talking about a smart city, and if you look at some of the activities in data mining, it gets very interesting because you could do some very, very useful stuff if you've got a crowdsourced set of accelerometers from a phone. You can actually do pothole tracking. I'm just waiting for the chuckle because, of course, Edinburgh is legendary for its potholes. So connected infrastructure. Simon mentioned the van. Now this van is touring around, and I'm going to show a picture in a moment of a van that looks just a little bit like this, and you might, if it's in the right order, where is it? I'm going to skip to the picture because it's actually quite useful. No, right, okay, give up. We'll find it later. I must have rearranged the slides, and it was quite difficult setting it up. So
It was actually the first one you had it on.
was it?
Yeah.
That one? Oh, I've got a much better picture than that.
Oh, you have?
Yeah, much better picture of that. So it'll appear at some point in the future. And it was a colleague, and he put a photograph of his van on Sky, and then in the background was the old man of store covered in snow. It's absolutely fantastic. But that's a real practical problem, because if you get as far as the northern edge of Skye, data networks really aren't up to much unless you're really lucky. So Bob mentioned attack vectors. If you own a Range Rover in London, they actually recommend you buy a crook lock. And the reason they do that is because there are people floating about with jammers that actually stop you locking your car remotely. And I saw Bob nodding. So that's, these things are actually quite serious. So I'm going to talk a little bit about devices and networks. Networks is where I spent a lot of my time. Supervisory control and data acquisition, things that have to tolerate quite unpleasant industrial electrical noise and heat and all that kind of thing. And very often it's people. So Bob was talking about where's the perimeter, and perimeter security is actually practically impossible when your device, the endpoint is your mobile phone or your smart band or anything like that. So it gets quite hard. Now I have brought a couple of bits of real technology with me that I'm going to use to build a proper home control system. And it's actually really difficult, because if you go and look in the marketplace, there are loads of vendors selling connected hub this, connected hub that, technology to do this, and none of them are interoperable. So it actually gets quite... So the Internet of Things, is it all good? Now I quite like this slide. There's a couple of cracking slides that I've acquired from a colleague when I put a call out. So anybody recognise that? That's a Google car. It's great design. And as somebody who likes engineering and design, that really don't cut it for me. So remember the Jeep? That was an attack vector. So they had to recall a load of vehicles because there was a slight problem with them. You could actually make them stop remotely, which is a bit scary. I had an engineer from Jaguar Land Rover sitting in my car last year, and she said the safety case for the control system in the car was quite extraordinary. So the safety case is a big pile of documentation. So cars are not allowed on the road when they've got a load of electronics in, unless they've actually documented everything and tested it to death. So it's really, so the IoT is almost dangerous in principle, and Google have said that most of the accidents caused by their car have been human error rather than the vehicle. But I think might have been one or two recently that put that to. So the Samsung TV, you enable the voice activation and it records everything and plays it out onto the internet. So that's not a lot of fun. I quite like the picture though. The IoT, as Bob said, totally reliant on networks, and this is just a short list, and I know I'm pretty much standing in front of it. LoRaWAN, that's low energy radio, Bluetooth, BLE, Zigbee, 3, 4, 5 generation, mobile and 5 generations coming. LDP 433 megahertz, Z-Wave and passive Wi-Fi. If you haven't seen passive Wi-Fi, that's actually quite interesting because it's devices that are getting energy from the Wi-Fi in order to activate, so they don't actually need a battery. And one of the things I've brought along with me, apart from a Raspberry Pi, and you've probably seen one of those in the past, is a little 433 megahertz operated switch. As I sat down and thought about the security for my own home network, when I put this thing powered by a Raspberry Pi and some code that you can practically pick off, it's all written in Python, you can pick it off the network really easily. I thought, well, that's all right, because I'm going to sit that behind my firewall. Yeah, and then I thought, hang on, what about jamming? Yeah, somebody just wanders along with a jammer. If you can jam the Land Rover, you can sure as heck jam 433 megahertz. So you really have to be very careful about your product selection and how you design a control system to tolerate somebody jamming it or trying to hijack it or impersonate. So it gets really, really quite difficult, and it takes a lot of thinking about. My particular favourite is the one at the bottom, because that's a lot more difficult to hack. Yeah, that requires physical access, as Bob said, to the control. And physical controls, you go visit a seriously big data centre, and the physical controls are something else. They really are. And having spent 6 hours in one a couple of weeks ago, I know exactly what it's like. So I don't know if anybody picked this up. There was a hotel control system, a blog. This chap had visited a hotel in London, and it had got Android tablet controlled systems for the lights and all sorts of things. And one of them was built into the wall. That was fine. But two of them had got an RJ45 cable. So he thought, oh, that looks interesting. What can I do with that? And he found out it was running Modbus over TCP. And if you don't know what Modbus is, it's an industrial protocol for programmable logic controllers. And I spent 6 weeks writing a piece of code to do that about 25 years ago. It was written in C. So there's no substitute for a risk assessment, which goes back to what Bob was saying. And trust. Trust is really important. One of the points that I was thinking about. So attack vectors. If you walk into most places and you unplug the device that's attached, you can stop somebody hijacking the port by implementing 802.1x. That's standard. Wireless just makes it easier. But if you've got a cable, you've still got packet sniffers. Everybody knows about Wi-Fi hijacking and session hijacking, all that sort of thing. But jamming is really quite a cool way of interrupting the way your operations. And one of the things I've never understood is why mobile phones in prisons are prevalent. Why don't they just put a jammer in? So I'm going to talk a little bit about home automation, because that's quite close to my heart. Anybody who's got the proprietary home automation systems that you'll see on Grand Designs and things like that, the lighting controls, they were wired historically. And there was miles of wiring in the ceiling to connect it all up. Building a passive house is one of my ambitions, and you really have to have some quite sophisticated technology to do that. But it's mostly about insulation. Here we have a Raspberry Pi on the left. That's the image I picked. The next object is a 433 megahertz transmitter. The little plug, the energy plug, is 433 megahertz. You can create a cloud at home with these things connected and control them with a Raspberry Pi and a piece of code. It's not that complicated. The bit at the bottom is the homegrown version of the transmitter in the middle at the top, but you can actually buy these components for a couple of dollars or a couple of pounds each. It's really quite straightforward. But I didn't fancy the breadboarded version. I just wanted something to plug into my Pi, preferably my steak Pi. So that's a picture that came from one of our demonstration kits. It's a fish bowl with environment monitoring on it. There's the van, thankfully turned up. It's a great picture, and I've actually been to the bottom of the Old Manor store. It's a fantastic view, and I sent him a picture looking back to where his van had been parked. So the connected cow, you might think this is an object of fun, but it's actually really serious. You can tell by the way the cow walks when it's coming into estrus. If you know when it's in estrus, the timing, you can determine whether you get bulls or heifers. And for farmers that are doing selective breeding, and an awful lot of farmers are doing selective breeding either to get bigger lambs, or there was a TV. Anybody seen This Farming Life? Well, it's a program about Scottish farmers, and they're spread all over the country. And one of them happens to be a friend of a friend at work, and he breeds Limousin cattle, and his bulls go for about up to £5,000 a head. So it's, you know, and that's how he gets a lot of the income for the farm. So it's serious money. It's really important sometimes. So that's a practical application. What does this all mean? I love this photograph. This is one that was in the slide deck that I borrowed. If you get it wrong, it could be really disastrous. Not just from the point of view of losing data, but from reputational perspective. So I'm with Bob here. You know, having a consistent environment that you can deliver. Doesn't matter whose it is. So the governance is really essential, and these are some slides that my colleague sent me, because we've been doing quite a lot of work in getting this ready. Standards, lack of standards, or thereof, which is one of the things Bob mentioned. That little device on the right-hand side looks like a RJ45 socket. It is, but it's actually a fully fledged HTTP server as well. And that's been on the market about 12 years. How do you keep that up to date? It's quite hard. So Bob was talking about, you know, we need security standards to manage access, authentication, and accounting, because without that, you don't know when the bad boy's running around causing chaos. And for all the widgets and things you want to connect, you have to have trust. You have to have security built in from the ground up. It's not an afterthought. If it's an afterthought, it's too late. The bad man's already done the damage and he's causing chaos. So a little bit of guidance. These are my opinions, I hasten to add. If you can control your light, central heating remotely, then so in principle can somebody else. Gateways, you use the word gateway, that's a real old industrial control approach, because connecting dissimilar networks always needed a gateway of some description. And home hubs and devices like that are no different. You need a framework, and it doesn't matter which framework you choose a framework. My preference would be a framework that I've developed on a device that I understand what's on it, that I can control what goes in and out of it, so you can selectively control when it phones home or not, like the television. I've got an Android television. It's only had 3 software updates since Christmas. But that has to phone home in order to find out that it's got an update. So, final points, I think, you know, if you're expecting to get regular updates in order to tackle security problems, we are living in hope at the moment. It's optimism. It's a triumph of optimism over realism. So some key takeaways: solution design, solution implementation. Now I'm starting to sound like an architect, aren't I, which is my day job. Select the products carefully, vendor support and awareness. I like open source because multiple eyes mean you've actually got a better opportunity. But Microsoft are doing fantastic things with open source. SQL Server on Linux coming in the next 18 months or so. You can't make it an afterthought. It's critical. You don't want multiple gateways, because each one of those is going to consume some power. I think that's just about it. So there's a question slide there, but we can take those later.